Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the October 1st, 2025 meeting of the Joint City County Committee. And I'm calling the meeting to order. We're still waiting on a few folks who I think are on their way, but we'll get started because we have a very packed agenda today. And we'll start with the roll call.
Chair Jacobs,
Here.
Vice Chair Baker,
Here.
Councilmember Caballero, Planning Commissioner Chagaris, Commissioner Lee, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton,
I'm here.
Commissioner Valentine.
And are there any adjustments to the agenda?
So we have one adjustment, item number, number 5, the Durham Housing Initiative Task Force Report. We're going to have to move that to next month. Ted Helbron, who was going to be presenting that to us, is unavailable today due to some illness in his family.
Okay, so we will look forward to having that at our next meeting. Thank you. Any other announcements this morning from anyone? Okay. We have approval of the September 3rd, 2025 meeting minutes. Are there any revisions? If not, I entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Baker, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Middleton. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the minutes are unanimously approved. We have the city and county manager priority items. And we have two esteemed attorneys with us here today.
Good morning, ma'am. Nothing from the county.
Good morning, Chair Jacobs. Nothing from the city.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are not doing item number 5, and so we will move on to item number 6, Community Goals and Objectives Report. And we have with us Kayla Seibel.
Good morning. My name is Kayla Seibel.
Kayla, sorry.
That's okay.
Kayla. I should know that after all of these years. Thank
No
you,
worries.
Kayla.
Yeah, we're just getting the PowerPoint up. All right. Does that work? Okay, cool. Let me try. Yes. All right. Good morning. My name is Kayla Seibel, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. I'm here to give you a brief overview of the Community Goals and Objectives Report Card. You have the report card as an attachment. I will share just a couple of highlights, but certainly we can talk, answer questions about any of the data points. This is our first report card as the comprehensive plan was adopted 2 years ago. In this report card, we're showing big picture data and trends about our community. We highlight projects that have started or that will either give us data or help us track work that we've already done to address resident concerns. The data is organized by 8 equity indicators, usually dealing with access to resources. A little bit about the data. The data comes from a few different sources, many of which are local to Durham. Some of the sources include socioeconomic data from the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, our Planning Department dashboard, the Durham Neighborhood Compass, and we point to the new housing data platform that you would have gotten a presentation on before this that came out recently. Some of the data in this report card might be a little bit older than what you see on the dashboard just because of the timing of when it came out. But we're aiming to show 4-year trends for this report card, and then subsequent report cards. We'll see what makes sense, but hopefully an update of 2 years of data. Also, we want to demonstrate how access is changing or improving for residents, particularly historically marginalized or underserved communities. So we looked at the different places the city and county have identified over the years for either strategic investment or equitable engagement, and decided to use the equity emphasis areas shown in the city's Vision Zero action plan. We cross-referenced these areas with other recent projects, and this one provides the best coverage of residents with low incomes, areas that were historically redlined, or folks dependent on public transportation, folks with limited English, folks with disabilities, just to name a few. There's a long list in the report card. And we think this is a good geographic resource for the department as we demonstrate equitable impacts of government decisions. The report card includes short sections of data that provide a snapshot of what we think is the most meaningful data to track. It gives an indication of how things are going on a particular topic. And these snapshots, they're not all inclusive of all the data. There's more data we could include or could consider for next time. As I said before, the indicators typically point to how conditions have changed or which groups in our community have the best access to transportation, parks, how neighborhoods are changing, or how staff is improving access to government decision-making. There's lots of interesting nuggets of data in here that's probably too much to cover in a short presentation, but I think in summary, the data supports what we've heard from residents about difficulties accessing housing and daily needs. I'm going to drill down a little bit into access to resources, but I'm also happy to hear your observations about which data is most interesting or meaningful. So one way to demonstrate access to resources is through a density map or a heat map exercise, which is shown here. We wanted to overlay these clusters of important buildings or services that folks need regularly with the equity emphasis areas that are shown in the light blue, and also within that urban growth boundary. That's that dark brown color on the edge. So the heat map shows clusters of schools, childcare, libraries, health clinics, grocery stores, and parks, and shows a general pattern, not a precise measurement of proximity, as tempting as it might be, to tie this map to folks in the area and how they can reach those resources. This particular analysis doesn't give us a great indication of that, and I'll explain that a little further. So to explain a little bit, looking at the heat map, the sparsest clusters of daily needs or resources are shown in this lighter color, like a lighter blue color. And then the darker color gets to the densest proximity of resources to each other. So that demonstrates the clustering of resources. As you can see, the densest clusters are concentrated in the central and southern Durham, all within the urban growth boundary. Many of the equity emphasis areas are covered, but there are some notable gaps, particularly in the northeast part of the city and county. And of course, I alluded to a deeper examination with better data and analysis tools could get us closer to measuring that 15-minute community that we've been talking about. So we have data in the report card further on that shows approximately approximately the number of residents who can walk to a pharmacy or a bank. That's data from the neighborhood compass. It's a little bit older, so in order to duplicate that analysis, we need location data that's current and updated in a form that we can use, as well as access to a specific analysis tool to demonstrate feasibility of actually walking and biking to those resources on existing sidewalks or bicycle facilities. So for now, this heat map is what we have for a starting point for that analysis. So as I alluded to, there's some limitations to the data, some barriers we ran into with data collection. Much of the work we do in the planning department is collecting from sources that have done the original research. So we're usually an end user for a lot of data. So trying to pull this, what we're trying to do in this report card is pull these data points together in perspective for policy conversations. So some of the gaps we ran into was we need some better non-residential data that's accurate, organized, and updated. I mentioned the older data in the neighborhood compass. It's possible to get, just takes a little bit longer with what we have. Since this is the first report card, understanding which data is most important, particularly with topics like transportation, where there's abundant data. And finally, finding population-specific data, we wanted to demonstrate how certain populations are impacted differently, like folks with disabilities or Spanish-speaking populations, just to name a few. More studies and data to come, particularly in the environmental justice section. And there's data around tree canopy that's coming, and then an open space plan that's going to give us, hopefully, some more data that we can use and track in the next report card. So with that, that's my very brief overview, laying out the report card, and happy to answer any questions or bring up the report card and dive into any of the details. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyla. And I just want to note that this is historic, doing a 2-year report after the comp plan. and, following through. I just want to thank the staff for really following through with what we said that we were going to do. And, we've never done anything like this where we're trying to really track how the implementation of the goals and objectives of the comp plan, how it's going. So I really appreciate that this is an iterative process where you all are trying out different things. And, but I really mostly also just appreciate that we're following up, thanks to you all, on what we said that we were going to do. So I have a few questions, but I will wait and hold my questions for other members of the committee. Okay. So one of my questions is, how do you all see this actually impacting the work of staff with the comp plan?
Good question. Since this is our first one, we're first time compiling all of this information together. I think that from what I've seen, it's really pointing to that the work that we're doing is moving some of these data points, or hopefully that will show up in the data, but the work that we're doing is in line with what we're showing as the most pressing needs in our community. Sarah.
Yeah, I'll say that, this first run, since it's so soon after the plan's adoption, we don't, the data is not showing a whole lot yet, but really the goal is to, as we track this over time, to see, are the indicators in our community moving in the direction that the comp plan intended them to? And if they are not, then what else do we need to do as we revise the comp plan and put other projects into place to try and move those indicators in the direction that the community wanted? So it's a bit of a tracking tool. It's not intended, it's different from the EAR that you'll hear about next, in that it's not intended to track all the homework assignments from the comp plan. It's intended to track kind of the more intangible, bigger goals that we're trying to get at community-wide, which is much more difficult, and I think why we had never done it before. So I'm very excited that we're doing it.
And I think also there's a lot of data in here that would be of interest to other people in the community and other work that people are doing. I guess I was thinking one thing is it would certainly be a red flag for things on, well, either it's like, hey, we're doing really good on this, things that jump out, either positive or negative. And I'll just share that some of the things that I'll just give you some of my feedback. One is I thought the heat map was really interesting. And I think that for me, it made me think about because it really aligns with a lot of the transit corridors. And so thinking about how does that help us think about the TOA areas, transit opportunity areas, and also tying that in with the 15-minute communities. Thought the demographic information was really fascinating. Not surprising, we're seeing the decrease in the African-American population in Durham, but seeing the dramatic increase actually in people who say they're of two or more races. I thought that was a very interesting demographic. And then, of course, the increase in the Latin population. One of my thoughts is I don't know how all of this is going to be impacted by what's happening in our country right now. And also related to that would be the data around top employers, because the list of top employers are many of the employers who are under attack by or being negatively impacted by the policies of the Trump administration. So I think that it's going to be also, we'll see, it'll be interesting to see what happens 2 years from now, where we see shifts in some of our data that is not due to anything that we've done, but is due actually to national policies. And then I think on the good news front, was seeing that home ownership increased in Durham 3% to 56%. That was a good news data point. And also related to employment, seeing the increase in wages and opportunity, economic opportunity. Again, I hope that continues despite some of the national policies. So anyway, I really enjoyed reading this. And one suggestion I did have around the cost burden, the data point about being percentage of people that were cost burden. I think it would be good to have, there wasn't a comparison there with 2020.
Right,
So
okay.
yeah, just so we can see that trend.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Caballero.
Yes. Yes, those are unique. Yeah. That should be unique. Let me take a second. Sure, sure. Mhm. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Oh, you have.
No, I
okay,
just
sorry.
want to celebrate
Okay.
the fact that home ownership is going up. It's interesting how we tend to, when metrics kind of tack with how we want to frame things, they're cool, and when they're not, we question their validity and their reliability. But I do want to celebrate that and acknowledge that fact. So thank you.
And also the percentage of multifamily versus single family homes. I think that's something to also celebrate if we're really going to be serious about aligning ourselves to a comp plan that pushes density, that the basis of all of it. We can't really achieve that with single family. Just glad to see that.
Hey, good morning. I think this is a really good report. I think it's readable and accessible. I know I don't want to just play it up because it looks good and it's pretty, but there is something to be said for that in terms of accessibility and readability and people being able to look at our documents and get information from them. And I do think that there's something to be said for that. I also really like this because it's not just showing numbers and analysis, but it's pulling in sort of factoids from different places. It's not just looking at measurements. It's also kind of throwing in like, what is the city doing here or there? So it's just extremely accessible. It's, in little bite-sized pieces, which is for better or for worse, kind of how we gather information in our current society. So I think that's a good thing. It is a little bit more, this isn't a criticism, it's a little more of a report than a report card currently. You've definitely mentioned that, I'm not, again, it's not a criticism, it's just a note. There aren't a ton of, there are some, but not a ton and not in every category, sort of measurable indicators saying we want to go in X direction based on the comprehensive plan. Again, not a criticism, just a note. For example, the equity indicator is really more of a bucket in which we've gathered different factoids from different places. I found the housing portion really useful. Access to daily needs. I think for me, that is a critical function of the field of city planning. How can people get to the things that they need to get to on a daily basis? And obviously heat maps, I like heat maps. They also are just kind of like, here's where stuff is and people are. There's sort of like a city planning meme that that makes fun of heat maps. But again, I like them. It can be very tricky, but I would say if I were to strengthen any part of this report, it would be access to stuff, things that people need, food, childcare, schools, parks and playgrounds. And I know how hard that is because I've done that GIS work before and it's hard. And so currently it's gathering from the hard work that other people have done. You know, pharmacies is in there in a different section, but it's in there. You know, it's not very easy to just get a GIS layer that shows pharmacies. You have to like have the data behind that. And for example, like the question about the distance to grocery stores, I don't even think it's looking at percentage of residents. If I'm reading it correctly, it's just looking at census blocks, correct? So, and we don't know how many residents are within those blocks. So it's kind of a rough measurement there. Yeah, so access to daily things. I did have one specific question, travel time to work on page 22. It doesn't include biking and walking. Is that for any particular reason? Is it because the percentages are so low that it's not even worth showing? That's just one question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So what I pulled from was overall travel time to work, that it was just the cumulative minutes.
Well, there's the travel time to work. There's
Yeah.
also the mode,
mode, yeah.
share,
Yeah.
which didn't include biking or walking.
Oh, the mode shared?
Just a note. I don't know if
Okay, yeah.
it was so low that it wasn't worth.
It's possible it just wasn't in the census data, but that could be an area to dive deeper in for sure. Yeah.
And then also the access to economic opportunities section, we might just want to clarify that the Durham's minimum livable wage is specific to City of Durham employees. Otherwise, it looks like we have got a really good minimum wage across our city. So yeah, just to reiterate, if we were to really focus on any section, in my opinion, it would be to strengthen and deepen the analysis around the 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk to food, childcare, schools, parks, playgrounds, trails, jobs, whatever we can realistically achieve there. And also if there's a measurement, like if we can say X% of residents live within this distance. And I know that's hard, but if that's something we can do, that'd be great. So again, this is a good report. It's rich in information. It helps paint a picture of what's going on in Durham. I liked the little takeaways section at the end. I think that's the way to go. And appreciate your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, thank you. And I guess one final comment or question is, how will this be shared out with the community and just other stakeholders in general who could benefit from using it?
Yeah, so right now, as far as the process, it's traveling alongside the EAR as an attachment. So it's Planning Commission is going to see it. It probably will be in the board, the elected boards as an attachment as well. And I'm available to give presentations as well to those meetings. And we're going to put it on our website. I was thinking we could have wherever we keep the comp plan, make sure that this is with it.
Yeah, we'll send it out in our weekly newsletter. We'll probably try, and I think this is one of the things that we have been working on, is having more materials that when we go table like at events, and sometimes they're just general events about planning and what we do, to be able to have materials like this that we can share. So I'm excited to try and get the word out more broadly about this.
So there'll be some hard copies. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. All right, next we have the evaluation assessment report, PTM, and policy amendments. Aaron Kane.
There we go.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone. Aaron Kane with the Planning and Development Department. When I was first preparing this item, I had a PowerPoint for you of one slide for each of the 78 policies that we looked at. but then I realized I'm not a sadist and I decided not to do that. I don't have a PowerPoint for you today. I do want to just talk very briefly with some notes about what the evaluation and assessment report is. That is something that the comp plan and the UDO call for us to do every 2 years. However, with the development of our new comprehensive plan, which is now 2 years old, we put the EAR on hold. So it has been 7 or 8 years since this has been before you. The EAR, Evaluation and Assessment Report, is essentially, just a look at where we are with the implementation of the comprehensive plan. We propose any changes to policies or the place type map of the comprehensive plan. And in this iteration of the EAR, we're also, because we've been asked, going to be looking at some data results, especially regarding housing and other factors. However, we're going to do that in a second phase of the EAR. This first phase is going to just look at policies and the place type map and provide some recommendations to those. As you'll see in your packet, there are 6. Here we go. There are 6 proposed changes to the place type map. However, one of them has changed. If you'll scroll down just a bit. Nope, too far. Yep, that one. We had a conversation with county real estate yesterday, so this is different from what's in your packet. The change here is to go from originally what was shown in your packet was a change from suburban commercial to rural and agricultural reserve. Talked with county open space and real estate yesterday. They would prefer for this to be community institution with the understanding that it would be civic in the new UDO for their zoning district. And they felt that this aligned better. So we'll make those changes when they come to the boards for adoption, but that is a late breaking change that I want to make sure you all were aware of. Other than that, what we also did was look at all of the policies that we use that are identified with a D, as in relating to development. Many of those we use in the comprehensive plan consistency review that you see in your zoning cases. Now that we've had a couple of years of experience working with these policies, we have recommended several changes that you will see in your packet in attachment A. They are either maybe removing or adding policies to the D designation so they get reviewed. Some changes to the actual policy. This is not meant to make a great change to the policy itself, but more just clarification, tweaking, readability, things like that. We're not proposing any major changes to any of the policies. What we're also looking to do is change the commentary. Make sure that gets specified, follows the plan better. The commentary is not regulatory, but we do want to run the commentary by you because it's staff's interpretation of how those policies are to be implemented. We want to make sure that staff is carrying out the wishes and the intention of the elected officials as we do that. So with that, I would just like to go ahead and open it up to your comments and questions and potential edits or suggestions that you may have to anything staff has recommended. We are taking this to the Planning Commission on October 14th. So you certainly have at least until then. If you don't have anything today, you have my contact information, and please feel free to send us any comments, questions, edits that you may have. And with that, I'll open it up and let you all provide your input.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I'll just say there's a lot here. I personally, when I read through it, I felt like I felt like I really needed to try to understand a lot of the because there's a lot of proposed changes around removing the D designation and then the edits. In general, I thought the commentary was good because it helped to further clarify things. So I do have some questions, but I'm going to stop and again, open it first to committee members. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, reading this, I'm really excited how in a full-throated way, in blatant way, we are putting in policies that are so reflective of the bones and the anatomy of our comprehensive plan. It's almost, I mean, I lament, this comprehensive plan on the county side was unanimously adopted, but it wasn't a unanimous vote on the city side. When I look at these policies, it's just, I'm really, really, really proud of I know that they're policies and it's a plan, but there's no ambiguity in what we want to see happening with these developments. And this language, I think, is not ambiguous, doesn't mince words at all in terms of to preserve and protect historic resources, design of new developments, policy 32, policy 40, encourage, not demand or require, but encourage affordable housing and all new development proposals. I hope, and folks that are listening will read this and take this seriously, and also kind of nullify and push back against some of the narratives about what's going on with this UDO rewrite. And I'll say more when we get to the UDO piece, because I think we owe the staff an apology, because some of the spin about the work you're doing, about this UDO being taken hostage for other purposes, when you guys are working extremely hard and faithfully translating the spirit of our comprehensive plan into this document. Those that don't know, I understand, but those that do know should not be silent, and we should be full-throated in making sure that folk understand that this UDO is proceeding under the watch of professionals and is faithfully capturing what we enshrined in our comprehensive plan. These policies, I think, typify and illustrate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know.
Not here. We keep going. I had a question. This is great. This isn't really about what I'm saying. This was like an additional thing. We have designated some privately held property as open space, and I know that I had raised that as a concern. I understand when it's space that's already open space or was clear that it was going to get protected or in some way. And so I would love an analysis, because we're looking at place type maps with this around that. I have deep concerns of telling a private property owner without any real dialogue, 70% of your privately held land is now open space. And so I just want to flag that, because I know at the comp plan, we knew it was big. We knew that the impacts parcel by parcel would be a little different. So I'm just flagging it again.
And I want to lift that up because, for instance, Duke Forest, which is, I think, around 6,000 acres, maybe more, that is not public open space. That is property that belongs to Duke University, and they can choose to develop it at any time. I found that out personally when I led the campaign to create Hollow Rock Nature Park. So I totally agree with what you're saying. We need to be very aware of that issue.
Hi, this is Scott Whiteman from the Planning Department. I wanted to say at a subsequent meeting, we can talk about the open space designation issue. I know Councilmember Caballero brought this up at least once before, so
Yeah.
We heard you. We can talk about that at a later meeting.
And hopefully that is also part of the assumptions of the current city-county open space plan that's taking place.
Yeah, certainly. That's definitely something we will assess with the city county open space plan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know I ask y'all a lot, so I really appreciate it.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Well, I just want to echo what Mayor Pro Tem said. It's really, it was a great refresh to read back through all of the policies in this way and seeing them in this format versus just in the plan. And to your point, Mayor Pro Tem, that is the whole point of our UDO revision, is to implement these policies. That is the purpose of the UDO revision. The UDO revision process is not going to be a diversion from these policies. It is actually to make these policies real. So I guess one thing, if you could clarify, there's a lot of places where there's a comment that these policies don't need to be part of the consistency review process, but because they are going to be part of the UDO policies. Could you just, I guess, explain? Because there are different ways that these policies will actually be implemented, right?
Right.
Some of them will be just through like site plan review or through a rezoning or whatever, but I think it'd be helpful to just explain, because some of them are being removed from like the D designation, right? But if you could just clarify if they're not in that designation, just in terms of your day-to-day work, how they will be implemented.
Sure, I'd be happy to. That's a great question. So when the comp plan was originally drafted, a lot of these do relate to development. So it made sense for them to get that D designation because they are development related. What we have found, and something we've heard from the community, is that we have a number, you'll notice in the comp plan consistency review documents that a number of them say, in the commentary, this will always be met because they will have to follow UDO requirements, whether it's provision of sidewalks, tree coverage, things like that. And so we were getting a critique from the community that the number of policies being achieved by proposed developments seemed inflated since they were going to have to do these things anyway, right? Are they following the policies? Well, they have to follow the policy because that's in the UDO. Also, we have had a couple of UDO text amendments since the comp plan was originally drafted, tree coverage and phasing being one of them. So some of the policies that had the D designation that we were reviewing, while originally the applicant would have to go above and beyond the UDO in order to meet the policy. Now they do not because the UDO has addressed that. So we wanted to take a fresh look, see which policies were more inclined to need something from the applicant in order to be able to meet the policy and not just have a string of policies that say, that are going to say, yes, this is being met because they're going to have to meet UDO standards anyway.
That's really helpful. I think that's very helpful. And, as a best practice, that's the whole point. We want things to just be in our UDO and this is what you do. And it's not dependent on a rezoning or things like that. So I think that's really helpful to clarify that. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, though, it's important to emphasize that if you read through a lot of these policies, the first word is encourage. And presence in the ordinance, I want to manage expectations, for our citizenry and our neighbors and our friends who may be listening to this meeting or who will get this document in its finished portion. I asked a question at a work session some time ago to council. I asked, what powers are we not currently using or leveraging as a council what are we not exploiting that after this UDO rewrite, we will have augmented or added to our toolbox? Now, what are we missing and what are we allowed to put in here that we weren't currently using? The answer was flatly nothing. That we are already exploiting all of the power we have within the letter of the law. So when you see in the word encourage, even if it's in the UDO, we are telegraphing that we will work with developers and we will encourage them, but we cannot mandate it. And even though it's in a UDO, if you ever see the word encourage, and I've gotten plenty of may and shall lectures from our attorney folk and went to law school on YouTube. So the difference between shall and may. So I just want to point out, wherever you see encourage, even though it's in the UDO, don't get mad at us when we come up to that line of encouragement, but don't bring the full force of our government down because we can't. So it's an ordinance, but within the ordinance, there's language that is encouraging. That's really important because I've seen some really contentious hearings and meetings where folk were like, well, you're not making them do this. And a lot of false advertising going on. So I just want to be very clear here. Thank you.
Thank you. I also just, so there was some language in here that referred, I've saw it a few times, that talked about sensitive transitions. Is that defined anywhere?
It is not.
Okay. I would, is it possible to define that? What is meant by sensitive transitions? Or it just was like, what?
So you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll say that I think it depends a lot on the context, right?
Mhm.
What are we transitioning from to? Is it environmental? Is it a neighborhood character, historic issue?
Mhm.
Like, what is it? And I think that term is used broadly and probably should be looked on a case by case basis. So, could we put together, something that talks about the different ways that it could be applied to different scenarios? We could, but I think it would be broad because we can't predict every, possible place where we might need a sensitive transition. That's my cop-out answer for today.
Yeah, I think there's some references to height, for example, when going from downtown to surrounding neighborhoods and so forth. We have
Exactly.
some reference to that, but it is somewhat subjective.
Can I add to that? You're talking about transitions like between uses or incompatible uses?
Yeah, there's several references in different policies.
And I think we've seen some of that in some of the modules that have come to us. I think for decades, the thing to do between uses was just do buffers. Like really big, wide buffers with like hedges and, trees and other things. And I think the field of planning has evolved a bit to, again, look at the context. And sometimes you don't need to have a giant tree buffer between a grocery store and a neighborhood. You can do something different. We've talked about walls. We've talked about limiting the width of the buffer. We've talked about eliminating buffers in some places. We've talked about sort of step downs in height. So I think that's how I would define kind of looking at the sensitivity of buffers and transitions from between uses. And obviously, the classic thing that you want to buffer is industrial uses from residential uses. I think that's sort of the classic case. But when it's other uses, it really does depend on the context, and there really are many different ways of treating those.
Sarah?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we're trying to really do through the UDO is, and the place type map and the zoning map is sometimes the transition is a different use or housing type, right? That helps make the change feel more natural and kind of accepted by the community from going from like a more commercial area to a more, single family residential, right? You're going to have apartment townhouses, you're going to have other uses that help make that transition. I agree with Councilmember Baker. It doesn't have to be this kind of 1980s, thinking of planning where everything is separated by swaths of vegetation.
Thank you. And I do want to make sure that we allow the opportunity. I know that the reason that I love an actual city is because I can walk to the corner store or I can walk to a bar, and that means micro commercial in residential. And so we have to get, I don't want to go to the 1980s. I want to go to the 1940s and 1930s, not socially, but at least architecturally. So we can take that, to have that micro, we talk about third spaces all the time. Well, we have to allow that in our zoning code to have those third spaces, to have that place where you can meet up with neighbors. There's so much commentary on isolation in our populations right now and folks not going out. We really want, and I always tell folks, people are like, well, that's ugly. I'm like, well, people design based on the rules we have. That's how it works. If you don't like it, that means it's our rules. And so we have to allow for that piece. And I think some of that education around it, right? Because most of us grew up with this kind of, you drive here, your shopping mall is down the road. You don't walk. There's, if we did an assessment in our comp plan of Durham residents and where they grew up, Mayor Pro Tem excluded from this, but I grew up mostly in the suburbs of Charlotte, and I find that dystopian, but So I do hope that we get to that understanding and that education piece for our neighbors, that if we really want that cohesion and that feeling, that means saying yes to some things that have been unpopular for the last 30 to 40 years.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I just want to clarify, it seemed like I saw several times that there maybe would be acknowledgement when there is something that was exceeding the UDO. So,
Yes, we want to leave the opportunity to, even if the UDO requires it, there are several policies or several types of facets of developments that applicants can exceed the UDO standards. And so we will hold those aside. And when they do, we'll acknowledge that and give them credit for it in our review.
okay, great. And my last question is, I saw the policy around rural and agricultural reserve, which is very important because we want to make, that's a very important county priority, is making sure we protect and allow people to farm and protect our farmland. What policy do we have that also, or place type, are we allowing also urban farming?
That would be.
Yeah, I'll speak to this super briefly, but so within the new UDO, what we've done after working with the Farmland Protection Advisory Board a good bit, who have been really great and really direct, we'll say that as far as urban ag goes, livestock, not so much. So livestock will be in the RA and the RB, which is sort of the RR and then the RS20 sort of supplement, right? So sort of thinking more outside of the urban growth boundary. And then RD will support any sort of urban agriculture that doesn't have livestock beyond what we already allow. So like chickens, and I think it's like one potbelly pig. But that's actually expanding urban ag from what we have right now. And then making sure that community gardening and other forms of communal agriculture are allowed as a primary use almost everywhere, but an accessory use in any zoning district, which I realize is not quite a place type map question, but as far as how we're translating agriculture into the new UDO, we're trying to make it more permissive in almost every way.
Okay, that's great, because I went on Thursday, the county Soil and Water and Cooperative Extension hosted our first ever native plant sale. And what I was really struck by, there were about a half a dozen local Durham growers, and a lot of them are doing their farming on 1 acre or less, 2 acres in the city. And it was really awesome to see that, that's happening. You know, people, at least one person is actually, that's how they make their living. And they're on 2 acres in this, in the city, growing native plants and selling them at the farmer's market. So I just we want to make sure that we are allowing people to do that and supporting that. Yeah. I also want to highlight, I forgot, this was really fantastic. I saw reflected in the policies, the ability to build trails and sidewalks off-site. That seemed like something new that staff was responding to, maybe not. I know there's been a lot of frustration currently with developers who want to try to do a trail connection, right? That's not like along the sidewalk or whatever. Is that something new that no?
No, it's not new.
Okay.
It's something we've encouraged, but I think we may have tweaked the language to make it more clear that off-site construction of off-site pedestrian facilities is welcome and will be, kind of credited in our review, for lack of a better term. I do, though, want to acknowledge that there are still challenges to doing that. And as the Mayor Pro Tem was mentioning, that is something we encourage and cannot require.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you again to the staff. This is a huge undertaking, a lot of work that has gone into this. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And next we have new UDO public art regulations and incentives, Robin Schultz.
Good morning again. Robin Schultz, Planning and Development Department, excuse me. I'll get that by the time the reorg happens again. All right, so I am here to talk to you all about public art and the new UDO. So we have quite a few folks with us here today. Can y'all give this wave? Yeah, we have folks from General Services and the Public Art Committee here who have been working with us on this, which I just wanted to start with because this is not all just me by any stretch of the imagination. So when we're thinking about public art, I wanted to start with some comp plan guidance. The comp plan specifically says support and fund community-led public art that focuses on sharing the history and culture of BIPOC communities in Durham. It's listed as historic resource, and more specifically, within the downtown characteristics for green space, it is explicitly listed as something that should be included, and I will come back to that in just a bit. So where does public art live in the UDO currently? Namely, 3 different places. It's explicitly denoted as an available commitment that can be proffered for zoning map changes. One of those, which has been recently, was for Latta Park. I don't believe that the art has been created yet, though, but that's one example. There are some exceptions in the sign regulations that say the placards and draping of public art on vacant buildings are exempt from those standards. And then lastly, when you can't provide street trees within the downtown design districts, it is an alternative that you can provide public art. And then one of the others are for rail signal shelters within design districts. I believe this was when we were going to get light rail. So we have not gotten any of those rail signal shelters for public art. We've gotten very few streetscape alternatives with public art as well. So just to show some examples, Unity by Mike Walker, I can't really see. Probably should go to the eye doctor. Foster in the Park, Taylor White. I will say that these 2 were provided as part of a DSUP, which was a design special use permit, as a way to sort of provide some flexibility. When we had to de-discretionize the ordinance, that was sort of taken out. So these are 2 examples of public art that we got via the UDO that we can no longer do. And then Positive Mental Octopus is an example of one that was provided as a streetscape alternative. So some things that we are considering for the new UDO as far as public art, the new UDO is more form-based, thinking about the structure. So one of those things is for structures with a build to requirement, so that are required to be along the street. There are some requirements for blank walls, essentially to keep that from happening. So it's landscaping, what's called a living wall, or public art as an option. We are intending to keep public art as a street tree alternative. Going back to that downtown characteristic from the comp plan, we're proposing allowing a 3% reduction in required amenity space within the higher intensity commercial mixed use zoning districts if public art is provided. So going down from 15 to 12%, which can be pretty significant for those really compact sites, right? And then so for all the other districts, having public art explicitly denoted and incentivized as being able to meet 1% of those requirements. And the reason that this is also important is that we won't hold them to the square footage or dimensional requirements, right? Because a mural would meet 0 square feet. So really thinking about ways to not disincentivize public art, but make sure that it is available to applicants as a way to meet their open space requirements. Some other opportunities that we want some feedback from you all on. The first is a public art fund contribution. This would be a voluntary contribution from the applicant at 1% of their total project budget to meet that open space provision that I had just spoken to you all about. Additionally, one other thing that we could do is provide an expedited site plan review. This would be restricted to projects in the mixed use district. It would be contingent upon our administrative capacity to provide those reviews. We currently use this for affordable housing, any school projects, and any projects associated with the city and county. The nice thing about this is that this would not need to be written into the UDO. We could operate this as a pilot since it's administrative on our back end. So we could sort of, tweak and do that as needed. One other thing is that, this would, trying to think about incentives and providing them politically right, is that like, we can't expedite everything that we want because we do not have the capacity, right? So there would need to be some sort of prioritization here. And so right now, we're prioritizing affordable housing, schools, and Durham projects. So that expedited site plan review would be subject to the capacity after those projects. And I'm here to answer any questions, as are these lovely folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you to the Public Art Committee folks who are here today for all of your work on this and for everything that you do to support public art in our community. Thanks for being here. Any comments or questions? Yes.
I had a question. Thank you for this, Robin. I see the expedited site plan review, but outside of that, what is the process for commissioning or getting permission or whatever it may be to do a project? What does that process look like?
Do one of you all want to speak to what it looks like to receive approval from the Public Art
Yeah.
Committee? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yep.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Holmes. I'm the Cultural and Public Art Program Manager for the City and General Services. We work with the developer pretty closely to make sure that they know how to hire local artists, what's the best practice for selecting artists, in addition to presenting the designs for review with our Public Art Committee. So I hope that answers your question. It's a pretty robust process that allows our Public Art Committee to inform the policy, and then staff work with the developers closely, meeting with them regularly as they move through the design process with the artists. So,
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, but you said it originates with the developer. What about, are there spaces where there's not like a developer, like community may be interested in some sort of artwork in a specific place? How does that process work?
yeah, we have for the city side, we accept public proposals. So one example is the Booker T. Spicely exhibition that's on display at the History Hub. We worked with the Public Art Committee and the Durham Cultural Advisory Board to help review and vet that process and give them technical assistance on best practices in fabrication. So we have a public process to accept proposals and review proposals from the public and also give them funding if they're seeking it. We have 7 different categories of public proposals, and we're working on making that a more public-facing process as we're adding more staff to our roster. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
And Rebecca, could you also, I just want to also lift up the fact that the county, we have a public art coordinator. Could you talk about how the county position works with you all and how we work together on
Yes,
this?
we love working with the county. Sarah Martin and Brenda Hayes Bright are our counterparts at the county, and we work collaboratively on best practices. We work together to support the Durham Cultural Advisory Board. We've learned a lot from them. They've learned a lot from us. So I'm really grateful that the county adopted their percent for our program about 5 to 6 years ago. So I hope that answers your question on the county side. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to staff for being here. I'm the DCAB liaison, and I know that the public art folks, both staff and residents, are really dedicated. And I don't know who's doing this, but the risers on LRB Creek Trail getting painted, they're really pretty. It's really nice to watch them slowly develop over time because I walk there almost every day.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is really exciting. There are some cities in our nation where if you get dropped off blindfolded downtown and take the blindfold off, it looks like every other city. So this is what really prevents us from being a cookie cutter type city. This is such critical work. I'm excited about codifying. It's so Durham to codify it as part of our culture and our legal landscape. I don't want developers to be in a position where they're pitting affordable housing. Councilmember Baker talks about parks all the time, and I'm pleased for his stewardship and that, pushing for amenities like parks, choosing between parks and affordable housing and art, and kind of, okay, if I do the art, we're relieving you from, parks and sidewalks. So I appreciate even you giving voice to the ranking or the pecking order, if you will, with affordable and the deference to that. So I want to make sure that we're not putting them at odds with one another. They're all important and all critical for making our city livable and enjoyable. The contribution, when we get contributions or profits from developers for our dedicated affordable housing fund and our school, we don't fill in the blank. It's voluntary. I'm wondering, asking them to volunteer 1%. You're volunteering, but here's the number you need to. Are we suggesting that if it's not 1%, we're not going to take your voluntary contribution? And have you given any thought to how did we arrive at that 1%?
Yeah, so the 1% came from a direct request from the Public Art Committee in their advocacy letter as to 1% of their total project budget. So essentially what would happen is that they would need to have that negotiation with the public art folks to say that this is the amount that we are going to contribute to this project in order to receive that approval from them, or that recommendation for approval. And if we don't get that recommendation from approval from the Public Art Fund, or from the Public Art Committee, then we would not give them their 1% of open space. Mm-hmm. However, since that isn't really codified in that way, I think that does provide some leeway for the Public Art Committee to sort of have that conversation. Mm-hmm. Like maybe they really want this public art that's maybe not quite like 1%, but if they give us the recommendation for approval, we will give them the 1% of open space or what other benefit.
Okay. When I'm sitting on a dais and a developer proffers a certain amount mm-hmm. for the school fund or for a dedicated fund, it is truly voluntary. Mm-hmm. So would there be any situation where if a developer did not come up to the 1% or cross the 1% threshold, where we say, okay, we're not taking any of your money, it's either 1% or nothing?
I don't think so. So I think that since they have the ability to recommend approval based on the art provided or the contribution provided, that is up to them to sort of navigate. Should they provide the recommendation for approval, then we're good. But as an advisory board, they get to sort of make that call based on the amount that's either being contributed or the public art that's provided. So that does provide them some leeway to not have to do exactly 1%, though we do hope that they will.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
Okay. Sorry. Go for it, please. Yeah, I was going to say that I think we also need to distinguish proffers in a legislative arena are different than providing an alternative in a regulatory requirement, right? And so an alternative can be prescriptive. We can say you can do this regular requirement, or the alternative is to provide 1% or a specific number. So in that regard, we can set a number and we can hold people to it because they have the option to do the regular thing or to do the alternative thing. We're not making them. But it is a little different than a proffer in a legislative kind of arena. So I just want to make that bit of clarification.
No, that's very helpful and indeed point noted. I'm just talking about whatever context we're in, making sure that we're not limiting our ability to get a deal and what we communicate and transmit to developers. But no, this is exciting. I mean, this is what we want here in Durham, and I appreciate the staff for the work. Good to see you folk as well. Must be fun to deal with art for a great city. So absolutely, cool place to work. Thank you.
Can we require public art?
I don't think so.
Okay. I think everyone deserves public art everywhere, but I'm also curious if we've identified or have thought about identifying certain districts, like an art district or an art corridor within our city where we'd want to prioritize art, specifically over other areas.
That's a great question. The Durham Cultural Roadmap is helping identify whether or not we need to have an arts district in addition to providing other resources. Currently, we do not have an arts district, but it has been mentioned by members of the public and also our advisory board, chaired by Steve Schul and Zena Howard. And also Mark Anthony Middleton and our new honorary chair, sorry, and Brenda Howard. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. That'd be great. Yeah, I've done development review in cities where we had arts districts and corridors, and in new developments, not only did we work with developers to incorporate public art onto the surface of the exterior of the building, but we also ensured that there was affordable art space within the building for artists. It was very specifically along certain corridors and certain areas where it was kind of prioritized because we saw that as kind of an agglomeration economy effect. So that's great. Thank you. Also, are we kind of treating all developments the same when it comes to art, or are we looking at thresholds? Because obviously larger developments will be done by larger companies that are, more capable of providing that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the idea being that 1%, even if they don't do the public art fund contribution, they provide the public art to get that incentive. I believe from reading the letter that the expectation is that the public art committee would then associate the scale and then expect that you're either going to provide that voluntary contribution of 1% or you're going to spend that on public art, right? So trying to scale it to the project cost in that way. Is that correct? She says yes.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll just say I am a big fan of public art. We've seen studies. We know that public art helps to reduce crime. It helps to build community. It supports our local artists who are small business people. There's economic development data associated with public art. So there are many, many reasons why we should be encouraging that. And we have seen the growth of public art in Durham, and it needs to continue. I will say that the city and the county can model good policy on this. The county, we have a policy that is 1%. 1% of all of our new construction and significant renovations, we designate not just, ours is public art / public history. So we look at both as being important, and even ways to combine that together. And I'm really proud of that, the work that we've done, like at the main library, at Admin 2, at our Admin 1 building, and even in our Health and Human Services building. All of our buildings, we have our new Board of Elections incorporates public art. And then in our affordable housing projects at 300 and 500, the developers are they're required to include public art. So one thing is we can all model it. And So I think the 1% to me resonates because that's actually what our adopted policy is, at least on the county side. I do agree that I like the idea of having a prioritization about the density bonuses because I think, that I don't want to see us competing with things like affordable housing. Obviously, that is the most important thing in our community. So I agree with having some way of prioritizing. And just to also lift up, will county staff be also directly involved with this process going forward? With our, our public art?
Yes, because they help us coordinate the Durham Cultural Advisory Board and its subcommittee, the Public Art Committee. They'll be working closely with us to help execute any developer funding that's provided or specific sites. So just it depends on the project.
Great, thank you. Yes.
This is a more practical thing for planning staff because historically, like BPAC has provided us comments in the past and how it's incorporated in our packet has improved over time. And so I just want folks to, I'm assuming we'll also get something similar and like, how are council members gonna see this on our side, I guess is my question.
So this is going to happen at an administrative level.
We don't have to see it.
So you don't have to see
Perfect,
it, right?
that's
This is
even
gonna be
better.
built in, when people come through for site plan approval or whatever, at that level is
Okay, so
when I.
we don't have to
correct me
deal
if
with it
I'm
on
wrong.
rezonings.
Yeah, you will
That is
likely
even better.
not see this at rezonings.
Okay, thank you. I'm sad for y'all and happy for myself.
But will there be indication as to whether the developer took the deal or not to us at the, when it comes before us? Or?
Federal.
It turned blue, which I've never seen. So unless they proffer it, then yes, you will see it. But if they just say, we're going to meet our open space requirements, and then at site plan, they decide to go that route, then you would not see it. So if they are like, hey, as a part of this, we are also going to make sure that we do public art as part of the zoning map change, then yes, you would see it. But otherwise, no, we are trying to create more avenues for public art to come about in a by right fashion.
Thank you so much. All right. Okay, big item coming up. Number 9, new UDO Model 3, content, environment, and infrastructure. And Robin.
I know, still me. Yeah, I'm gonna sit there though. All right, y'all, I'm actually gonna sit for this one because I need to scroll through it. We are gonna look through module 3 for the new UDO. And then Chris is gonna do the technology. Mhm. Yeah. Perfect. So I will say, this is roughly 93 pages. I don't want to go through the entire thing with you all, but I do want to sort of highlight what's changing and what's staying the same. So within this first article, which is Article 6, it's going to be infrastructure and public improvements. This is largely taken from our current Article 12. Some of the things that are going to be staying the same are the general provisions. One of which you'll notice is the phased development. So that is going to be the phased mass grading and tree protection amendment that we passed in the end of 2023. That is still remaining. The neighborhood layouts, the block standards that were part of a text amendment that Councilmember Baker worked on is remaining. Some of the new utilities also staying the same. Some of the new stuff that we've been working on are the streets. And so when we had a Vision Zero presentation to you all in May of this year, we talked a little bit about the fact that we were going to use the UDO as a stopgap measure to implement some of the new NACDO standards for our most commonly constructed rights of way. And this is to do that prior to the street design manual that's been decided upon in the Vision Zero Action Plan. So what can we do in the meantime? I do have Lauren here with me as well to talk through these with you all, should you have any questions. So these are focused mainly on the streets that we are actually seeing constructed, which are going to be for new residential and for new mixed use. And so we have 7 different street types. They have smaller travel lanes, and they more frequently show off-road bicycle facilities. There are varying amounts of right-of-way, but the actual curb-to-curb is smaller than what we are seeing constructed right now in an effort to keep folks out of the roadway wherever possible, specifically pedestrians. You'll see that when we do have on-street parking, it's noted as a bump out. We don't want the entire street to be even wider, right? So it's trying to delineate when and where the parking is and providing that in such a way that is more efficient. For the street 3, you'll see that we have the off-street bicycle facility, street trees, sidewalks, and the smaller travel lanes. Neighborhood 4, it's that bump out again, and this time we have the multi-use path to the right, which is the 12-foot path. Getting into the mixed use, you'll see the bike and ped facilities, smaller travel lanes. The pedestrian zone is also larger here, right? We're gonna have a larger activated sidewalk. The mixed use street 2 is gonna have space for transit facilities. So you'll see down here in the left-hand corner, a transit shelter, as well as these spaces for delineated for buses.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
I saw that you have a place for a transit shelter, but I didn't see, there is no picture of a transit shelter in any of where it says I. Is that intentional to not?
Let's see.
So like it says, well, actually, I'm looking at the next one, sorry. The BRT one.
Gotcha.
So when you get to that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the transit shelter on this one. For the BRT, the transit shelter is going to be shown down here. It's not super well depicted on this one, but I will say,
See it now,
yeah, we've been working with the consultant to try and
behind the tree.
yeah, make it more obvious so that
Okay.
these will be updated. But yeah, definitely, definitely need a transit shelter if we're gonna have a bus only lane. That's a good point. But I can pause there. If you all have any questions for Lauren and I.
Oh, okay. We're gonna pause. Questions? Yes, go ahead. Councilmember Javier.
Thank you. Where are we going to see this again?
So essentially, if you are constructing within a mixed-use district and you were required to put in a new road, you're going to need to do one of the mixed use, right? And if you are constructing a new neighborhood that requires a public street, you will need to provide one of these street types as well.
Okay, it would be helpful to see like a percentage of total, like looking at what we're seeing right now of cases that are coming through, what percentage would this actually be applicable to? Because a lot of the neighborhoods that we see are private streets, right? They're HOA, right? So, because this is like, I look at this and it makes me feel like I'm more in the urban tier, but that's mostly built out or it wouldn't have a big enough impact to tip over what you're suggesting. So it's hard for me to understand impact of this decision. It looks great, but if it's only going to be 2% of the thing we're seeing, then it's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I will say that we are getting a lot of public rights of way within the suburban tier right now, which I can tell you because I was inspecting the trees out there.
Nice.
So we would get a pretty big percentage of new roads in the suburban tier. Do you want to add to that?
Boda Brinsky, Planning Development Department.
I believe what you were alluding to was a lot of the townhouse developments or the current UDO allows those townhouse lots to be accessed via driveway.
Yeah.
Currently in our proposed UDO, we're requiring streets or public streets in those instances. So we could show you the percentage with those driveways. The expectation here is that we would see more public
Yeah, and
streets.
I think what would be helpful is to take a current case and show me what it's going to look like if we approved it, right? It's really hard for me to see what am I approving? Does that make sense down the road? Like that looks great. That's not what most of Durham looks like, right? That's a level of density and a level of urbanness that like there's a tiny percent of Durham that looks like that. So how are we going to get from what we're doing now to that? I guess is my question.
What? Sorry, you just threw me off.
Okay, so I think a couple of things. One is because we're changing and essentially there will be no more private streets, everything will be a public street, right? That means that any neighborhood is gonna have to pick one of these four, right? And if it's mixed use, it's gonna have to be one of the mixed use ones. Now, I don't know that at the zoning stage, they wouldn't have to tell us which street type because they wouldn't, a lot of folks have not really fully designed everything. But I think, you know, the idea is it will be one of those. Now, they might commit to having certain streets already be a certain typology, and that's something that may start to come out as proffers and commitments. But I think moving forward, all of them will be one of these.
And then what happens? But that's not, I mean, there's a lot of streets currently that aren't that. So what is that? Like, how do we, what does the phasing look like? Right, how do we mesh it? This looks great, but then I'm going out onto a 2-lane country road. Doesn't matter, right? I want to have an understanding of the total impact, right? Like, what does this look like moving forward? I know where we're getting, I understand this is a movement in a great direction, I support it. I want to understand how we move a community that was at 100,000 people in the late 70s and developed accordingly to something that is much more a grid, right? Like, and I'm not with state partners who are also not necessarily, don't have the money, don't want to give us the money, and et cetera. So that's essentially what I want to understand. And maybe that's the part that is tricky, right?
Yeah, I mean, so to get at part of that, right, is that these are just for the new streets that are being constructed, right? And sort of just like a stopgap measure for the UDO this is the thing that the UDO can really influence right now. A lot of those like street designs and sort of redesigns that will be required, I think do maybe require work from transportation. Whether or not the entire street design manual needs to be adopted first that's on them, right? But as far as this is concerned, this is just for new streets that are being constructed. What can we hold developers to when they are building a neighborhood? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, okay, thank you.
It definitely will.
I'll just add, from my reading of this also is that, first of all, amazing, all streets will be public now. And then second of all, there was, further in here about with the street section that if there's going to be any major kind of additions or renovations, then these standards would have to be met. So you can imagine at some point in time, there may be some neighborhoods where there is massive redevelopment. So it's possible in the future that that would happen. And, so, yeah. Any other comments about these images, these different design options?
Yeah. This could be a complete game changer, as I think has been a little bit alluded to up here. These are much more of a city kind of streetscapes than suburban, and so it could completely change the game here. I like the streetscape standards, and I love the direction that they're going in. As I said, I think this could set a new precedent. I'm curious if we thought about yield streets in neighborhoods, in like residential neighborhoods where you have on-street parking on both sides of the street and enough width for cars to move, but you wouldn't expect enough on-street parking that you wouldn't be able to pull over and let someone come through. We have a lot of streets like that today. Is that something that's on our radar?
Yeah, hi, Lauren Grove, Vision Zero Coordinator in the Transportation Department. Yeah, we explored, NACTO has a yield street, so the National Association of City Transportation Officials has a lot of different street typologies that we explored. We, as Robin mentioned, tried to, in the context of the UDO street types that exist, come up with the things that we are seeing the most come through. And so a lot of the yield street typologies that we looked at, we integrated some of those principles into what you're seeing here. And we've also considered some of that in the alleys that we didn't quite get to yet, but what does that look like in the context of where we're not wanting to have on-street parking, make sure our alleyways reflect those yield street types.
And how rigid are these cross sections? Because I mean, usually in your subdivision ordinance or infrastructure, this is what you have to build. Is there any flexibility? Like if some developer came through and said, actually, I'd like to do this, it's closer to NACTO, but it's not quite in here. Can I do that? Is there any flexibility there?
So we are trying to come up with alternative configurations sort of like on these sheets, and the consultant is still working on those pieces. But the sort of difficulty with UDO is that unless that is explicitly denoted somewhere, then the answer is no.
Yeah.
We can explore adding language to that effect.
Yeah, no, yep. I know that's a little tricky. Yeah, I mean, these are so much better than what we have today. I mean, these are really, really moving us in a much, much better direction. I guess a few other things. One is, I think that when we're looking at sidewalks, that even in kind of the more dense mixed use areas, the sidewalk, pedestrian part of the sidewalk is 8 feet. And I think in like urban areas, we should have wider sidewalks than 8 feet. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I'd love to see something much wider. Maybe there's even a way of contributing, putting that toward open space requirements. Like if you get up to like really in a walkable street, like a 20-foot wide sidewalk, and does a portion of that go toward your open space? I raised that because I've seen that in other places. Street trees. Well, you know what? I'm going to hold that to comments. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is exciting. It's it's aesthetically pleasing. As I think about the nexus of all of the elements of our comp plan and our UDO, I mean, I can see a future where if we're going to have strict fidelity to our urban growth boundary, then we're going to be looking at more infill development. And when you're looking at more infill, there are areas that have the die's already been cast in terms of their character. One of our policies said preserving the historic nature of neighborhoods, And so if we're trying to shoehorn this or put this in close proximity to an already established neighborhood, I think to Councilmember Baker's point, we're going to need some flexibility. We're not going to bulldoze Walltown or bulldoze, the Merrickmore area, start over and build this. So if we're going to be doing more infill development, and to Councilmember Caballero's, I think, point as well, how much opportunity are we really going to have within our urban growth boundary, empty swaths of land within the footprint, within our urban growth boundary to realize this? Although I think this is a good template and looks great, reminds me of a city. But if we're talking about neighborhoods that are already established and this is in close proximity, and we've got a policy that says we're going to maintain the architectural flavor of that neighborhood, then I think we're going to have to build in some flexibility to meet those policy goals and to honor those other values that we've given voice to. And if we're not going further out into the rural areas and we're going to be more concentrated within the footprint, then I think this is going to, we're going to have to allow for some flexibility. We're not starting over a tabula rasa with our city. There's a lot of places already that, have character and structure. But this is great, though. A lot of great work going into it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, I appreciate the images. Seeing these cross sections is just really, really helpful. I think we have to remember, yes, to everyone's point, like, we have a lot of established neighborhoods, but we do have a lot of places where we could have redevelopment. Think about Hillsborough Road, for example. We've got one project happening right now where the Coca-Cola plant used to be. That's a mixed use. So we do have places in Durham corridors that we could see redevelopment, commercial areas, and into mixed use. Also, if you look at the urban growth boundary, there are a lot of areas that are still within the urban growth boundary, but kind of still the potential for future development that we can see this happening. So I do think it's really important. And one area I would like clarification on is the difference between what a multi-use path is versus the pedestrian area. Because we see that in several places. I guess we get there further down, right? But even on the cross sections that we just saw, there was some that had pedestrian, some multi-use path, and of course we have the protected bike lane. But can you define?
So at least in terms of defining the pedestrian passage and the multi-use path here, actually, let me go to one of the examples that has the multi-use path in it. So right here, the multi-use path is, instead of having bike facilities separate, right? So this is like both bike and ped to the left, and then the pedestrian zone is to the, excuse me, that was to the right, and this is to the left. And so that's just sort of your classic like sidewalk, to the left, and then the multi-use path where that's been proffered or even not proffered in this case, should it exist in the UDO, is just a wider path to accommodate both bikes and pedestrians because there is not, that is the form of off-street bike facility.
Okay. I think it would be good to define that. Like,
Okay.
for instance, in that picture for B, have somebody on a bike there. Because when you see it, it just looks like it's pedestrian on both sides. So I think that. And the other thing is, and I've raised this before, I don't know how we can do this in this section of the UDO, but it just seems like the planting zone, we do have the opportunity to do low impact development. And I just didn't, I did see further down in the UDO, but I still didn't see with green infrastructure, it was like, you can do green infrastructure, but it can't replace the stormwater rules. But here in the planting zone, we do have the opportunity. So if you all could just look at that.
Yeah, I will say that since the last meeting, we have been meeting with both county and city stormwater to talk a little bit more about green stormwater and low impact development and some of those issues. So you should be hearing more about that soon, but I appreciate you raising that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, go ahead.
Actually, just to that point, you guys don't need more work, but it would be interesting to have like a green street and say developments need to have like one green street or something. And I raised that because right now we've got street trees at 40 feet and a lot of best practices recommend 30 feet. And maybe that would be a green street and it would have LID. I think in new development, normally I see overhead lines buried. But in some of the redevelopments, in most of the redevelopments in downtown, we don't see them bury the overhead lines. I know that there's a weird provision in Chapter 160D that gets at that. But obviously, like building a street and in the process of building a street and a sidewalk, burying the lines at that time, rather than building a street and then digging up the street and then burying the power lines, there's one way that's a little bit easier and better. So if there's anything that we can do to incentivize or strongly encourage developers to bury the power lines, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone who inspects trees, I strongly agree. But yeah, they definitely have a lot of legislative authority that makes it a little difficult. But yeah, we are trying to. So each of the planting areas is at least 6 feet wide for the verge, because after talking to some of the folks who deal specifically with those dry utilities in public works, they said to at least accommodate both the tree and that line or lines. I don't know if fiber has come through y'all's neighborhood recently, but that is like the sort of smallest space that we could do essentially to accommodate all those goals, right? While trying to keep the right of way smaller. But yeah, definitely heard.
Yeah, I think Councilman Baker raises an interesting point. I remember in my work with the league, we were trying to get optic fiber companies, while holes were open, to also bury dark fiber, put the infrastructure in the ground, exploit every opportunity when we were developing a building. The issue that I know folk had run into around the state is, from an aesthetical point of view, buried power lines are cool, but when it's time to repair those things, and having to dig up, I mean, you can use radar to try and isolate where the problem is, but digging up those streets to get to an isolated spot to repair a power line if something happens underground provides a whole host of challenges, as opposed to a line dropping, from an elevated line. So those kind of conversations as well, they inform how we handle, worst case scenarios. I guess it's part of it as well. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I just want to add that, we have the authority to require that new lines be buried. Where we're limited is we cannot require the burial of existing lines if they're going to be used. And so that, I think, is in the redevelopment space, where the dance is like, how much do they want to, because it is a big investment. But we actually, I just want to put a little plug. We have a team now in the newly merged department called Right of Way Management. And they are an amazing group of folks. And all they do is day in, day out help manage these private utility companies that are going in the right of way, destroying the right of way, and getting it fixed for residents. So if you all hear, this is a random plug, if you all hear folks experiencing issues with this type of scenario, please refer them to us, because we have a team of people that help manage that.
Awesome. Yes.
Sarah, can you tell us, because because we're sending stuff your way, speaking of right-of-way issues, because of, I forgot which company is wreaking havoc right now, but we are getting a ton of emails. Who should, because right now I'm just forwarding it to you.
Yeah, and that's fine. You can continue to do that. Daniel Valero is the manager of the
Okay.
Right of Way Management Group.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I just want to put a plug in. This is your city responding to you residents. So that's great. Like the reorg, that's in direct response to what folks were saying, both the building community, both the development community and residents. So I just want to lift up how staff has responded. I have a quick question, Commissioner Jacobs. So to your point around the Coca-Cola facility, I think about Roxborough Road. That's if somebody was like, if you were a billionaire, what would you do? I'd redevelop Roxborough Road. And just take out all of the hodgepodge fast food and all of it. And make it more cohesive. If we are seeing kind of turnover, there was the Durham Tech project on Roxborough, there's the Coca-Cola plant. My guess is as things we start to hit that urban growth boundary a lot, we're gonna see a lot of turnover of those large surface lot, kind of older shopping malls. What would be, because all of that is gonna be facing a state-maintained road, what is our power there to legislate for that? Because NCDOT doesn't have to follow those rules. And so that was what I was trying to allude to, is what's the impact? Where does this actually play out? So I'd love to hear some thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so this would have, as you said, no impact on anything that NCDOT maintains. However, should you want to build a neighborhood or construct something that would require a public street that you would like the city to maintain, then we could say, well, you have to do this. And if the city is not maintaining it and it's DOT or it's private, which is far less likely, right, in the future, that then becomes the sort of delineation. Is this DOT or is this like a public street that you would like the city to maintain? If so, build it to these standards. If it's DOT, we cannot hold them to these standards. Is that?
Yeah, because I'm just reimagining, I mean, you're starting to see it. You can reimagine something like this getting, up Roxborough, up some of these places and kind of those multi-use mix of townhomes, single families, some commercial redeveloped, but then its frontage is going to be on an NCDOT road. And so it might look pretty on the inside and we've got all these pretty standards and I think that we want that, but then how it interacts with that space, it just doesn't. So for those of us on TPO and other places, we really have to start pushing our NCDOT partners that this is the direction that the city wants to go in. And I won't be on council probably when some of this stuff starts to redevelop, but I can imagine probably in the next decade, it's going to start because the development pressure, we're just going to run out of places to build. And so it's going to become more likely that we see the turnover in these older commercial developments. And that's a lot of our city.
All right. Are we good with streets? Shall we keep on trucking?
Yes, please.
Perfect. So moving forward, we then have pedestrian passage multi-use, which we talked about before, the streetscapes, which coordinate with those street typologies. We also have the street trees. This is borrowing pretty heavily from our existing section, essentially 1 per 40. With overhead utilities, you can plant understory trees instead, but it's 1 per 20, right? So the rate increases. Generally, how this has worked is for new streets, these are located within the right-of-way because we can essentially require that they accommodate the required planting area, whereas for existing roads and streets, those are on private property because we don't want to plant a tree where it's probably not going to live. And it is a little bit harder to require that maintenance, right, in a sort of piecemeal fashion. So that is street trees. Councilmember Baker, did you want to speak to that? I thought you had a comment earlier.
No, I think I made the comment just
okay.
1 every 30 feet, wherever, where it makes sense. I mean, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Some streets don't need any street trees. So,
gotcha. Thank you. So moving down through utilities. All right, we are moving into environmental protection. From a big overview, just some of the things that are changing are we have incorporated both tree protection and open space into one article because these play together, right? I'll go through the tree protection and open space in more detail and go through some of those changes that we've incorporated. We did not make any changes to floodplain, still following all the state standards and are more stringent where we currently are, right? For riparian buffer protection, I will say that one major shift that we did is that we have defaulted to the state in some aspects. So essentially what happened is that we created a table back in the day to try and incorporate both the Noose and the Jordan standards and sort of Frankenstein them into one thing. Rather than do that, we are incorporating the state references instead. We're keeping our regulatory authority over the Jordan. State is keeping the Noose. All those requirements will still apply. However, the issue with like Frankensteining a table is that so the Jordan rules are set to be updated within the next 2 to 3 years. They're working on them right now. The Noose were recently updated. So rather than having to keep trying to make the table work together in all aspects, just citing state law, working through that, and then keeping our existing buffers where they are larger than the state that is being maintained. There was a court case that essentially said that you could not have state buffers or have buffers larger than the state. After speaking with some folks at DEQ, essentially the consensus around that was should you have a essentially some sort of authority or delineation for why your buffers are larger, then you can do that. And so since ours were explicitly denoted as being larger in some cases via our stormwater management plan, which is connected to our clean water permit, that sort of sufficed for them. But we don't have as much leeway to sort of increase those per that ruling.
Robin, what about in terms of, and the Triassic Basin rule, like I saw in here that there's special delineation for Triassic Basin.
Yep.
So can we, which is really good to see, can we, using that thinking, could we say we want, for instance, bigger buffers in the, because of the conditions in the Triassic Basin soils?
Right. So potentially that is an avenue, but that does require some other, so the existing ones are connected to the stormwater permit, right? So we need some other like document or authority or something to link that to, right? Some sort of larger authority that we can lean on before we can update the UDO to say that. I don't quite know what that document would look like. And I think that is legally a little shaky. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we certainly couldn't do that of our own volition in the UDO. We would have to get the state buy-in on that. And like Robin said, that right now, the only kind of grace they're giving is if it's baked into, existing other approvals. So we could explore what that might look like, but I don't think we could do that now as part of this project.
Ma'am, the basic issue is called preemption, where the state has created a regulatory process. It's basically a bar to local governments trying to exceed that. That's why if it's tied to another program like the Clean Water Act or stormwater control that's regulated by state or federal authority, then it's not simply a matter of local government trying to be more stringent. Sometimes that may lead to a difficult situation, such as what you're talking about with the Triassic soils, but then it comes into, can that be tied into a state or federal requirement?
I know we have had success with, Ryan Eves going to DEQ, DWR, environmental management, and getting permission for Durham to do things that were beyond the requirements, which was, the use of flocculants, for example. So we do have a precedent of actually getting permission to diverge from this. So that's why we have a foundation to build on in terms of that. So I did that, again, something to look at.
Yeah, I think to Attorney Massey's point, though, those are programs where we have not been explicitly preempted by the state. So S&E controls, for instance, is one. Whereas we're talking about our riparian standards, which is a different category of regulations.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll also add just briefly too, that there was like a court case sort of separate from DEQ that then like further said, no further than the state. Because when I do talk to members of DEQ, they're like, yeah, we absolutely wish that you could, right? But we're sort of operating within the confines of this also like judicial decision as well. So it's preemption and judicial fun.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this is a really important conversation because sometimes the way that the conversation's been prosecuted is as if, we're lowballing ourselves in our UDO. Like Durham has chosen the least stringent requirements. And then we'll have public hearings where folk are saying, well, you're just following the minimum in the UDO. You should do more. And you should require them to go above and beyond the UDO. So I just want to say for the record, I hope that staff is exploiting however far we can go, right up to the line. Let's make that our minimum. If there's a standard that we can just, our standard operating procedure is go as far as we can go. So I want the public to understand that whatever's in our UDO represents, by our best reading, our legal minds and our professionals, that this is the most stringent we can get within the letter of the law. and that we're not lowballing it. We haven't left capacity on the table that we're not exploiting as a city. So when folks say, well, you're just doing the minimum requirements, and it needs to be understood that the minimum requirements are the requirements at the state, that we're not lowballing. And I think it's a disservice, to allow that conversation to fester, particularly by those of us that know better, to fester. So I think it's really important that it's not only said here, but it's repeatedly said to our citizens and our residents, and still push developers, to do more, but understanding that we are not lowballing ourselves. We are going as far as we can as a local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So to your point, we are doing as much as we can here in Durham. And also, we actually have gone above and beyond with our stormwater and erosion control measures, because we went to the state and got permission to do things related to the Triassic Basin, Triassic soils, a lot of the issues that we have seen in East Durham. We got permission to do things that nobody else is doing. And I think that's highlighted in the new UDO, environmental standards, that section. I want to note, I also want to lift up the new standards related to reseeding that are in here, because because one of the things that we found is most effective is not leaving where we see a lot of the silt getting into the water is when, is not stabilizing the soils. And so what's in here is also, I saw a lot of really good measures related to requiring the stabilization of soils. And that's one of the most important things that we can do. I've learned that from being chair of the Upper Neuse River Basin Association, that this is what we've learned from studies, that stabilizing the soils, it's very simple. It's not expensive, and it really works. So I want to lift that up, that's in here.
All right. So to that point, all of the sedimentation and erosion control we ran through Ryan Eves and kept where it currently is, since he had rewritten those rules not too long ago, right? So making sure that we're keeping those as they are. Any further changes would need to go before the state, the Sedimentation and Erosion Control Board, I think it's what it's called, or the Environmental Management Board Commission. Regardless, should any of those changes be required, that could easily be incorporated as a text amendment, similar to how we did a couple of years ago. As far as water supply, watershed protection, wetlands, stormwater, and inventory sites, all of those are remaining the same. Steep slopes, we had a request from Public Works so that any steep slope that was disturbed, right now, the grade has to be returned to 2-to-1, right? And so they have requested that it be 3-to-1 in order to help stabilize downslope erosion, things like that. So we included that within the ordinance as well. One thing that I'll speak to pretty briefly before we get into tree protection and open space is that you'll notice that conservation subdivisions are not in this version of the UDO. There have been some sticking points with those. So rather what we've done is taken portions from those required conservation areas as part of the conservation subdivision and incorporated them throughout the ordinance. So sort of like surprise, every new subdivision is actually now a little bit of a conservation subdivision instead. And so I'll start getting into that via the tree protection and open space section. This is mostly the same. I will say that one thing that we've added is that one thing that can count is a Piedmont prairie, which is pretty exciting to me personally. Essentially what these are, if you're not familiar, they are areas that have historically been dominated by graminoids and forbs, so grasses and flowering plants, but maybe don't meet that required tree cover of 60%, right? But still represent an important part of Durham's native ecology. So letting those count towards our required tree preservation, I think is really cool and a really great step. towards some of our ecological goals in the comp plan. Here you'll see that we've delineated tree coverage by zoning district. Right now, we're working on some math to make sure that this is not any less than our current standards in terms of an overall acreage. I will say that additionally, this is being paired with the urban forestry's assessment, the tree canopy assessment RFP, which was just recently approved. I've been working with them throughout that process. What we're trying to do is essentially, we asked if we could get in on the request and alter it so that it didn't just measure a tree canopy assessment for the city bounds, but for the whole urban growth boundary, right? Essentially, they had done a tree canopy assessment in 2017. That was just for the city at that time, and it showed 52% tree canopy cover. We do have a goal of 55% by 2040. However, we have annexed a lot of land since then. We have mass graded a lot of land for those residential developments, right? So all of which is to say that we are doing math as a part of that assessment as well to try and see if we need to titrate our standards to make sure that we meet that goal. Because tree coverage, especially as part of the 55%, isn't just private development, right? It's going to include trees in the right of way and public land, parks, right? All those different areas that sort of actually do contribute to tree coverage, even if not in this like private UDO sense. So that's where these percentages are coming from. A lot of them are taken or modified from some of those existing percentages that we have. One big shift here as well is that we've taken the 7% required tree coverage from the Tuscaloosa Lakewood Neighborhood Protection Overlay, and we are going to apply it to all RD and RX3 that is below 4 acres. So essentially taking that from the MPO and saying, actually, this is for the whole urban growth boundary. And any site that's 4 acres or larger is going to have the similar 22% with the phased requirements that we did via that text amendment a couple of years ago. And you'll see we do have those commercial mixed use. They do say 0. That matches roughly what we have downtown, right? However, I will say that is tree coverage. That is not landscaping, right? This is retained forest or replanted forest. So trying to make sure that we are not limiting our TOAs and our downtown design districts, trying to make sure that we are growing in the right areas, growing up, right? Those areas will still have the required landscaping, street trees, et cetera. I do just want to make that clear that they will not have 0 trees. That is not the case. One thing that you'll see here as well for the conservation district, they have a 50% tree coverage requirement. They can go below that if they have a conservation easement or some other management plan that denotes it. This is pretty important because we do have some conservation land in the county that is mostly farms, things of that nature that might not be 50%, and we don't want to penalize those properties from operating as farms. So making sure that we provide that flexibility for them was really important. And I'm trying to think if there are any other major changes within tree coverage. Like I said before, we incorporated a lot of the primary conservation areas from the conservation subdivisions into this section. The ones that we did not were then put into the open space table. This is also new. And the way that this works is that you generally have a total minimum required percentage of your site to open space. So that's going to be this top row up here. We'll take R as an example. So let's say that you have an RD subdivision of 30%. Your tree coverage is 22% as previously denoted, and you have to meet those primary conservation areas if they do exist on site. So you have 8% left. 3% of that needs to be recreational open space, things like trails, et cetera. So that still leaves you with 5% left, which you can meet through public art, as we talked about earlier. Preservation of natural and cultural resources. This is where we took some of those other portions from the conservation subdivision. or flexible space. And there are a few different options within that. And those asterisks denote that if you do have those if you do have those natural and cultural resources on site, then you do have to protect those first before you can pursue flexible space. So that's sort of how we've taken the conservation subdivision framework and sort of applied it across the board to subdivisions, making sure that those resources are protected when they do exist on site. And let's see. Here are some examples of recreational open space, mini parks, a close, green parks, parkways, things of that nature, trying to amenitize stormwater facilities as well. We talked a little bit about public art earlier, plazas and courtyards. Here are those resources from the conservation subdivision as well. Some things that can count towards flexible space. How do you calculate open space, right? How is it owned and maintained? A lot of these are carried over. And then lastly, sort of thinking about the recreational land component. So essentially, you do have to pay an impact fee or donate land either within the city or the county. They have different rates tied to county or city code, right? So within the county, you need to either provide 1,150 square feet of land per dwelling unit, or you need to make a payment in lieu equivalent. And I did talk to Celeste Burns, who we don't get as many of these out in the county, right? But they did use that to actually purchase some land, which is really cool. Really excited about that. And then in the city, it's the same, but it is a lower rate of $575 per dwelling unit. And that is going to be module 3 in a nutshell from a pretty high view.
There's a lot here. Thank you so much. One quick comment is it would be great. I know you said for the open space, like there's like obviously a spot there for graphics, but I think similar to the street cross sections, the graphics are going to be really important. Like when I was reading this, I was like, what's a close? Like, so yeah, having those images will be very important. Was there any discussion about I personally really like boulevards and there are a lot of cities in the world where the boulevards are active park space. They're like people use the green space in the boulevards. There are like benches. Sometimes there's exercise equipment. Where would something like that be possible in our UDO?
Yeah, and I think currently as written, potentially one way that they could do it is that they could do one of those street sections on either side, potentially, don't quote me on that, with some sort of green in the middle, right? And then providing, should it meet some sort of minimum dimension here, if it had like recreational facilities could count towards, the recreational open space requirements. But that's a great question and definitely one that I can look into a little bit more.
Okay. And something like we see, like sometimes when I'm driving around Durham, you can sometimes see it in roundabouts, but often, I'm not saying often, sometimes you see like these grassy areas that are kind of stuck in the middle of all these streets and you think, oh, wow, that would be such a great little neighborhood park if people could safely get to it. Or I think about the Parkwood neighborhood that has these, they kind of have these little cul-de-sac-y things that have green space in the middle. Like, what would that be like?
Yeah, so I think that sort of functions as a close, right? So that's actually, I learned that from the consultant as well, what that's called. But essentially it is like a cul-de-sac that you like sort of follow that around and then has green space in the middle. They call that a close instead of a cul-de-sac. So you learn something new every day.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's why the pictures will be good.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, questions, comments on this section? Councilman Baker?
Yeah, I think I'm excited about the open space section. I think we're moving in a very good very good direction with this. It's providing a little more clarity about what we're looking for. I think we want passive open space that is protecting existing valuable open space and connecting existing valuable open space. And we want active open space that is not just leftover property, but is central, that the development is built around central and celebrated civic spaces where people can access them, and we're looking toward them rather than away from them. And it feels like this is kind of getting us closer to that. You know, I'm not a secret, a proponent of getting that public park dedication. This kind of opens up the door to that. It doesn't say it's got to be, but it's getting us toward that. I think that's something. And I also just wanted to raise something that I'm very excited to see here, which is provision written here. The development must be designed so that 95% of residential units are within 1,500 feet walking distance of the usable open space. And I think that's a game changer. Again, we got a lot of game changers here. That's one of them. I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about plazas and bringing in new and different kinds of open space. I think that's really important. It doesn't say you have to do this or that, but, you know, kind of puts it on the radar screen if you're, looking through the UDO and looking to develop in Durham. This is small, but I did notice under courtyards, it begins by describing plazas. Just one little thing there. I want to go back to block length standards because I saw that these are carried forward, but in the current block length standards, we do have a bunch of zoning districts that have a maximum block perimeter of 1,400 square feet and maximum block length of 550 square feet. And under the proposed UDO draft, the smallest maximum block perimeter is 2,880 feet when 5 acres. And that's, I'm just curious, did we lose that smaller block length?
No, so this is the first draft of the block standards from the consultant. We've given our first round of comments to them about this, and we've said that we want to retain those existing standards where possible.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Appreciate that.
Mhm.
And then what was the other thing? Oh man. Oh, sustainability standards and incentives. That's something that's come up a lot, and that's not in this module. Okay.
No, but it is being worked on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Well, I wanted to lift up the prairie. Being included in here, the Piedmont Prairie. And I think I was wondering, is there a minimum size for that? Because I didn't see anything related to that.
No, there's not a minimum size, but it does need to be surveyed by a qualified biologist. And I don't think that we have, to be honest with you, I don't think that we have enough remnants for it to overtake an entire tree coverage percentage. So I don't feel particularly worried about that just yet, if that's what you're referring to. But yeah, so we don't have a minimum on the amount of Piedmont prairie that can count towards tree coverage. I do realize that those function differently, but requiring it to be surveyed by qualified biologists and the fact that we don't have as many left anymore, I feel like I don't have a lot of hesitation about letting those count towards tree coverage.
And I wonder, is there any way should we be thinking about restoration as well? I mean, I know the Eno River Association, I think there's some of that maybe at Penny's Bend, the Triangle Land Conservancy out at Stagville have been kind of bringing back some of that. And I mean, it has huge value for like wildlife, for pollinators, for bird habitat. So I think also lifting up the value of those habitats is really important. So yeah, like I guess what I'm saying is, are we saying this is only going to be about protecting the prairies, or could it be somebody could get credit for actually bringing back a prairie or creating or restoring?
Yeah, so I think right now, as it's written, it's about preservation, but that's something that we can definitely explore for tree replacement. Then I do think that there might be some sort of like size cap or something along those lines that might be more appropriate. I have spoken with a few folks at Leaf and Limb who actually have done a few of those prairie replacements. And it does require like a 3-year maintenance window in terms of like monitoring. It's really cool, but
Yeah.
so just trying to think through some of the things as well, but I can take a look and see if there's some way to write that into tree replacement that makes sense, that
Okay.
sort of
I
functions
mean,
well.
actually, we also did that at Hollow Rock Nature Park, the field. They are bringing back native grasses and things like that. Could you give some clarification about the clear cutting 7.2.4? Because all I really saw was that you can't do more than 35. Was it? I didn't see, oh, it was about the buffer, maintaining tree buffer along, like all the edges of the property. But I felt like our previous clear cutting ordinance specified how much can be clear cut at a time and phasing and all of that. So I didn't see that here.
Yeah, so this is more specific to clear cutting as like a forestry activity. So this part is sort of directly taken from state law.
Okay.
But as far as the mass grading and phasing
Yes,
portions,
yes.
that is going to be both in phase development that has the minimum phase of 50 acres, right? And then has those other things set in. And then those other portions are going to be located up here, right? So you need to have the sort of incentive of like within this, should you have a smaller phase, then you can have, if you grade less, you can provide less tree coverage within that phase, right? To sort of incentivize not having them replace it, to have them save it in the first place. So all of that is still staying. We have not changed that. And additionally, I will say the mass grading buffers, which are a separate thing, are also here, but those are going to, I think those are within the development standards. And that just essentially says that you can't essentially clear cut or mass grade vacant property up to like the property line. If it is next to other vacant property, you get a buffer of 64 feet, I believe it is. And then if you're next to occupied property, it is a 32-foot buffer, I believe. But regardless, those standards are staying as well. But that's a great question.
Okay. And I really like in each section, the way you wrote the portion about intent or purpose. But the one section, if you could just maybe look at, is around open space, because I felt like the description of the purpose or intent of open space could be expanded. It didn't, I'm trying to remember, but it didn't say anything about, for the value for protecting, the ecosystems or habitats, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that, I was just going to suggest looking at that. Could you talk about the flexible space section? Is that something new? And what that was about?
Yes. So it's not new so much as it's delineated a little bit differently, but essentially it's a way for us to try and, so in that mathematical formula before of, having the percentage that you have to meet, sorry, I'm doing a lot of scrolling right now, and sort of trying to like prioritize certain things via the percentages, right? Flexible space is the sort of space that we like, but maybe isn't like a priority from what we've heard during the comp plan or from resident feedback. So what are the other sorts of open space that, we're getting that maybe don't meet those goals, but are still open space? So, townhome developments have to provide like the cluster box unit. And so we require that those are considered an open space because they're communal and maintained, and provides that sort of ease to like, okay, the HOA maintains this, this is where the mail goes, et cetera, right? But there are a few other ways and a few other things listed within flexible open space. Green infrastructure is one, things like that. Any sort of alternative layouts for those things that we listed before, if you have excess, things like that. So it's essentially just a way to think about open space that maybe isn't a priority via residents, the comp plan, or from you all, but other ways that open space still contributes.
Well, I appreciate lifting that up here. And then my last comment is I just really want to applaud the city staff who recommended changing the ordinance around steep slopes. I think that is going to really help address a lot of the concerns that we've seen around East Durham and around the Triassic soils. Like, this is a very concrete way to try to make a difference. So just want to also acknowledge the staff for that and lift that up for the community. All right.
One last thing that I'll say on module 3 is that we're going to start engagement this month. So we'll have a code connect on October 21st. Is this sharing? It's okay. Okay. On the 21st. And this is with the technical consultants. We'll have an in-person meeting on Thursday, November the 13th. We'll have a virtual meeting on Tuesday, November 18th. And we'll have expanded office hours as well. These dates were included in your packet, but we hadn't quite finalized this flyer just yet, but I can send this out to you all as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
And last item is just our 2026
Thank you, guys.
meeting schedule.
Yeah, you have that as an attachment there. We have taken the liberty based on this year's practice of removing the July meeting from your schedule. So we would propose to keep with the monthly because we'll be closing out UDO. We also have a lot of projects, that are going to be coming down the pike, and certainly we would confer with the chair if there's a reason to potentially not have a meeting if we don't have, projects that are ready to be presented or discussed. We can certainly do that, but this is what we would propose to you all.
Any comments? Yes.
Do we think that at some point we'll get back to our once every other month meeting schedule? Okay, I know we
After
moved
we
it to
get the
monthly.
UDO, we
Yeah,
gotta
yeah,
get the
okay.
UDO.
No, I know, but I'm hoping that we pass the UDO in 2026. Yeah.
I mean, if you all would like to go ahead and, maybe like after July, we go to every other month, we can do that.
I'm at least willing to have like in August to see where we are. And I mean,
We could, so I will say logistically from staff's perspective, I think it would be better to just adopt this. And when we get to,
No, that's what I
August,
was-
then we
yes.
cancel the
Perfect.
meetings. That way, at least we have the room booked if we need it or whatever.
I agree. Thank you. And then I know that Ted Halebron couldn't be here today. His whole family is sick. So he has asked to be able to present in November. Yeah.
Yes,
Is that-
absolutely. Yeah,
So
we talked
we just
about
move that agenda item. Okay,
Yes.
I was not here
Yeah.
for that, so I apologize.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do that in our
Okay.
next meeting. Yeah. Do we need to vote on this schedule, or
Yes, ma'am.
we do need to vote on the schedule?
Yes.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to adopt the,
So moved.
We
Okay.
have a thing to bring up after this, but you can roll on with it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, moved by Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the schedule is unanimously approved. And then our meeting next month, housing task force recommendations, and anything else on that we should be aware of?
Yeah, it looks like we will be talking new UDO again. Am I good to say what's on the agenda calendar, Robin? Bo? Okay,
yeah.
I'll let you. Okay, just making sure. Sometimes we put stuff tentatively.
We want to keep this rolling along. We want to get it adopted.
Yeah. So next month, we'll be talking a little bit more about the actual affordability and compact percentages that are part of the mixed use in the RD district, thinking a little bit more about infill standards, which we heard from you all, which ones we're carrying over, et cetera. And then also thinking about those sustainability standards. So really sort of this meeting was a little bit more about like neighborhoods and subdivisions, right? And sort of getting a little bit more detail on the infill development and what that might look like.
Okay, sounds great. I also would like to entertain a motion to excuse Commissioner Valentine.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Caballero, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Middleton. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you, everyone, for, oh, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to mention this during adjustments this morning, earlier this morning, but we have one topic that we wanted to just share briefly about. I don't know who was gonna, you thought I was gonna do it. Well, you gotta bring up the slide. Oh, okay, yes. So we have had a flurry of issues with RVs particularly. The ordinance currently requires that they be parked to the rear of a primary structure. That is in some cases, a very problematic thing. And because we've had a flurry of zoning enforcement, of complaints that have resulted in zoning enforcement activity, that has begotten more complaints as neighbors continue to like swoop neighborhoods and turn each other in left and right. In the new ordinance, we're up to about 40 complaints now that ZE is having to devote time to, just so you know. In the new ordinance, we are not proposing to regulate it the way it's regulated today. Knowing that that is going to change, even though we have been not wanting to process any text amendments to the current ordinance, it does feel a little bit disingenuous to be going to cite 40 people for something that we know we are purposely going to change soon. That is not the kind of customer service we want to have. So I wanted to float by you all whether you would be okay with us processing this one very small change to the current ordinance. To give people a little bit of flexibility. So basically, they could park their RV on a driveway beside their house. It would have to be parked at least 25 feet back from the road. But not necessarily having the burden of having to park it all the way behind the structure, because in some cases it's just not possible.
It's just like a middle ground.
Yes.
I would make a motion to, or do we need to do anything or just give you a thumbs up?
I think typically a thumbs up. You're not required to take a formal action.
I'm a thumbs up. I'm
Okay,
a thumbs
thank
up.
you all.
Okay, great. All right. And again, great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and input. Thank you, staff, for all of your hard work. And great meeting, and we are adjourned.